I'm Nat. I'm the head of community at Exceptional Individuals, and every Thursday at 12 UK time, we deliver these free open webinars for everyone that wants to attend. And I'm pleased to say they are going great. We've had a real nice momentum, people coming back week in, week out, and we're currently in the process of coming up with ideas for next year. So if any of you have any ideas, feel free to let us know. And next week, we're also going to be doing a little quick survey just to get some opinions. Today is all about dyspraxia. We've talked about dyspraxia, we know what it is. We've talked about dyspraxia in pop culture, and that's essentially how is it being displayed around the world. We've talked about celebrities that are neurodiverse, but let's kind of go a little bit deeper and look at dyspraxia and the type of people who are not just living with it, but thriving with it. So if you do not know, Exceptional Individuals, we support everything from dyslexia to dyspraxia to autism to synesthesia to dyscalculia, anything which if means the brain works differently to the majority of the population, but isn't inherently a disability. So my first question, who is someone with dyspraxia that you know / have heard of that is exceptional? So this could be a celebrity, it could be a well-known person, it could be yourself, if you want to talk about yourself, it could be a family member, it could just be someone, your average day local hero. Ariel, the Little Mermaid, I like that. I've never met her personally, but yeah, she does have a lot of the characteristics of dyspraxia. Radcliffe, Harry Potter, yes, we'll definitely be talking about him. They actually have a few different actors who have dyspraxia that we are going to be talking about. Anyone else? What about in your day-to-day life? Maybe do you support people? Do you have a family member who might be dyspraxic, who, despite their challenges, are actually doing pretty good in life? And I think is really, though we are going to be focusing a few celebrities today, and celebrities are really good for help raising awareness, let's be honest, they're not that motivational because they just seem like an alien, like a completely different planet. I do like examples of real life people you could bump into the street and their success is very attainable to you. So we got my nephew, love it. One of my friends has dyspraxia and Asperger's. It's very common to have multiple. I think I might, but not confirmed. Join the club, treat yourself. Oh, Katie has also picked Miranda. Yes, though she is a cartoon, I guess. Well, an animate a caricature of a person. She definitely has the characteristics. And we mentioned that in our pop culture series. Found out I have it from your test. Oh, that's great. But just know that our tests only tell you characteristics and traits. It's not an official diagnosis. So just be mindful that our tests are there to give you an indication whether or not you might want to explore it a little bit further with your GP or a professional. But to be honest, it's a spectrum. So, if you resonate, good for you. So great. Now let's get right on to some inspirational stories. The first one I'm going to solve for my personal friend, Jess Starns. I don't know if any of you know her, but she's a complete boss in the dyspraxia world. Not only has she made the Sure Trust Power 100 list, where they had like over 700 people they had to interview, and they did the most influential people with disabilities around the UK. And there she is with, I forget his name. Do any of you remember? He's on the last leg. He was rated the most inspirational disabled person in the UK. I know, impressive. I'm sure one of you will remind me in a sec. But what makes Jess particularly inspirational is she set up an organization called Dyspraxic Me. And Dyspraxic Me is a peer-to-peer support group that supports people typically around 16 to about 30 with dyspraxia. And she did it because there was no groups available for people like her. And she realized that being dyspraxic is very different to, say, being dyslexic or autistic. Yes, there's similarities, but she just didn't personally resonate. So in this group, she started delivering sessions like vlogging, she did public speaking, she did social picnics, but also things like dancing. and assistive technology, assertiveness and social skills. I loved it so much, I even became the trustee. And only a few years back now, we registered and now it's an official charity. So we're really pleased that Dyspraxic Me is a peer-to-peer support organisation that is now a legit charity. And it's completely free to attend. So if you are in the UK and you match those age ranges or you know someone that does, just give it a Google. It's a very grassroots organisation. But even if you aren't in the UK, obviously, like everything, we're doing a lot of online things at the moment, and we're currently in search of a new trustee. So if you think, you know what, I wouldn't mind helping out a small local organisation, definitely get in touch. Jess also organises Dyspraxia Awareness Week every year. Now, in October, they bung all the neurodiversities together: dyslexic, ADHD, autism. All the awareness weeks are all together. But what Jess has been able to do single-handedly, well, I say single-handedly, she has help, but she is the brains behind the motor. She has done had dyspraxic comedians, poets. She gets people from all different backgrounds, with all different talents, and showcases how amazing people with dyspraxia can be if given the correct support. Being to one of the craft sessions with Dyspraxic Me as a guest. Oh, Sanja, nice to have. And she also works at the British Museum, and she's done a degree despite the challenges with learning challenges, making museums more inclusive for everyone. And she's working on this really interesting project, which is about the history of labels and how we can rechange it in terms of like diagnosis. So yeah, there's a quick one of Jess. But if you're looking for inspirational role models that are young, attainable, and real, and not a celebrity, even though she is in her own right, definitely recommend giving Jess a look up. Moving on, and again, this is only applicable if you're a TV watcher. Which Britain's Got Talent group has spoken out about their dyspraxia? Oh, Sanjan, yeah, Jess is an amazing entrepreneur for her age. Completely agree. Interesting, the Dyspraxia Foundation claims to be behind Dyspraxia Awareness Week. Stefan, no, Stefan, they are behind it, but you can run different ones around the country. So she's just one individual who organises a Dyspraxia Week within the overall banner. Yeah, I don't want to take credit away from the Dyspraxia Foundation because they're bosses as well. They also have a really good youth group for the Dyspraxia Foundation youth. So I'm seeing that none of you watching Britain's Got Talent. I don't blame you. Simon Cowell, he needed to be retired a while ago. But anyway, there is someone, and it is a person called Jamie Lambert. And if you don't know him, do not worry, though he is 1/5 of the group Collabro. And they won in 2014. And he speaks about when he was diagnosed with a learning difficulty, and he recently became the patron of the Dyspraxia Foundation. I appreciate he's not a major celebrity, but the fact we've got someone who is somewhat of a household name in the UK speaking publicly and actually saying this is something I want to be the face of was a really great starting point. Oh, Sally used to love Britain's Got Talent, but she's boycotted it. I get it. Stefan, I've been a member for years. They are dominated by professionals and middle class parents who want to know how to cure their kids. Well, I still want to stay friends with them, so I'm not going to comment too much. However, Dyspraxic Me, I think, is a really good alternative just because it's for people who actually have it, not just the stereotypical concerned parent. But to be honest with you, that's part of the reason why exceptional individuals started in the first place. Because yes, you've got like the National Autism Society, Dyspraxic Foundation, Dyslexia Action, like all those other organizations. I'm not taking away from what they do, but typically it's middle class white people who do not have their conditions talking on behalf of their children. And that just doesn't resonate with us, particularly as adults and independent people. But always interested to know your thoughts. However, still hats off to the work they do, because more the merrier. Now, here's some proof, because I don't like... One thing that I've noticed is a bit of a trend, is just calling every Tom, Dick and Harry under the sun dyspraxic or dyslexic or autistic. You've got to show proof. If any of you attended our workshop a while ago, recently, neurodiverse or not, we started doing a bit of myth busting. For instance, Walt Disney, not dyslexic. Yet everyone quotes him as being dyslexic. Mickey Mouse, maybe, but not Walt Disney. And Sanjana says, self-help member-driven organizations are the best. I completely agree. So now to another local hero. This one, again, is a very, you wouldn't have heard of him. He's just a local person, but he has dyspraxia and has become a personal trainer and an award-winning boxer in his own small little community. And I think sometimes it's the small wins that are more motivational than the massive ones. So this is a guy called Perry Ripley. And I don't know Perry, but I researched him through doing this webinar and I found his story really interesting. When he was younger, he was told that he would never have full use of his left side of his body. It just didn't kind of respond in the way, like in sync with the other side. He had trouble at school with writing and copying, and as a result, behavior issues normally kind of follow suit. So you see this starting to look a little bit glum, but don't worry, he turns it around. He got involved in activities to help with his coordination. So despite finding it challenging, he got involved in it and he didn't let it deter him. From 9, he took up boxing with the help of his dad, and his dad's in the picture. And within a few months, he already noticed improvement in his left side. So despite the doctors telling him, mate, you might want to sit out that one, it's just not going to happen for you, he was still determined. And it's not to say he got rid of his dyspraxia, no, but some of the symptoms which people thought would hold him back, he was able to overcome. He said, I found my movement hard, such as skipping, but he stuck with it. And now you can find Perry is a coach and he teaches other people how to get fit, how to get healthy, and is a massive advocate for those with disabilities. He didn't want to go any further. You know, I said he's not going to become the next heavyweight champion of the world, but in his own right, I think he's done pretty damn well and has overcome some pretty amazing odds. Okay, by the end of the day, hopefully you'll find at least one person a good role model for the future. Now, I put Cara Delevingne here. So I always pronounce her name wrong. And you might think, isn't she just a model? She is a model, but she's actually an incredible human being. And when you all like Google dyspraxic celebrities, she always comes up with Daniel Radcliffe. But there's this thing where people will post something, copy and paste, and then it kind of expands. So I'm going to go into a little bit detail about, is she dyspraxic? And also, how has it affected her? How has she overcome it? So first of all, do you know that she is actually a musician as well? But what instruments can Cara play? Is she on the drums, on the guitars, or on the flutes? And hopefully, unlike Ralph Wiggum, she doesn't put the flute there. So, interestingly, yes, the two people who have answered, yes, there we are, free, are correct. She can play the drums and the guitar. And what's really interesting, she learnt to play the drums because she had so much energy built up that she just needed a way to release it. To my knowledge, I don't know if she has ADD or ADHD, but she has dyspraxia. And she found the drums a really good way for her to just kind of practice and coordinate herself. She was doing the drums even before she started modelling. And guitar is same story, really. But I think what makes her really interesting is rather than play the guitar like everyone else, she has a particularly interesting way of playing the guitar, which maybe has something to do with her dyspraxia, but I know I couldn't ever do it. So yeah, as well as that, she also plays the guitar, but she plays it backwards. Seriously, like behind her head, strumming around. Why? She says she did it just because why not? She wanted something to be a bit more interesting and fun. And I think for someone without dyspraxia, playing guitar is hard enough as it is, but she learnt to play it behind her head just because why not? And I think that's a perseverance of people with dyspraxia, because people tell you that you're going to find that harder in life. Maybe you shouldn't do that. We'll do it anyway. And you know what? We'll make it look really difficult, maybe more difficult than it has to look, but it hasn't stopped us. Gavin says creativity can bring out the best in individuals. And Rebecca says Cara's an actress as well. She is an actress. to somewhat success. She's been in Paper Towns, which was originally a book by John Green, which I love. She's been in Suicide Squad, the original one, which we don't talk about anymore. And she's also been in like Valeria. And that was 6 months of her doing mostly all her own stunts and actions, a really active position. So Cara goes out of her way to do things which she would naturally find more challenging than other people just because she can. And I absolutely admire that attitude so much. So she spent a lot of her time with mental health professionals when she was younger, and a lot of behavioural issues and just didn't really fit in. Apparently, she would screw with them, trying to get them fired as her patient. I can't condone that, but it is a little bit funny. At 9, she was told that she had the reading ability of a 16-year-old, so a really good reader at a very young age, very similar to something called hyperlexia, even though that typically affects younger people. Yet at 16, she was told she had the reading age of a 9-year-old. And I think this is pure dyspraxia, how it can change around. I don't think she got worse at reading. I think it just depends on the day and the stresses you have going on to how much your everything affects you. And apparently she always found writing hard in exams, yet she's obviously a very intelligent human being. Alan says, I can relate to this reading age of 21, age of 12. Yeah, for me, I was a terrible reader, but now I can. It took a while though. Ooh, Sanjan, she showed that dyspraxia can be a very able tool. Go Cara, yeah. I actually never liked her at the first, because to be honest, I did think, oh, model. But if you spend some time researching her, you know what? She is a great example of using what you got and like get enjoyment out of challenging your disadvantages or challenges. So here's a quote. She says, the worst part of being a model is I hate wearing high heels. I can agree. More than anything, it's the physical side of modelling that is bad. So yeah, despite being, I'm pretty certain, the most high-paid model in the world, the literal definition of a supermodel, she did struggle with the catwalk and like moving around. And some people say it's easy. Trust me, I've walked in heels. It's not easy. She uses that. So yeah, good on her. But anyway, enough fangirling. I'll move on to Stephen. Stephen is another local hero. So he is a football coach, and his story was very inspiring, so I wanted to share with it. He said, I always felt physically behind everyone else. You know, from an early age, he knew that there was something different about him. I knew what it wants to do. He said he knew what his body wanted to do, and he knew all like the logic behind it, but his body couldn't physically perform the actions. I'm sure you've all experienced some time thinking you can do something, but the body's not allowing you to do it. I think we call that old age, but he felt this even at a very young age. Yet, despite this, he loves football. Football has really helped my balance, but I know I have to play a different way from others. And I particularly really like this quote because that's exactly what Cara did. It's not saying, okay, there's a challenge here, and I'm going to swim up river my entire life just to prove you wrong. It's about getting out the river and walking up the hill because you can walk easier. It's about finding a different way of doing something and accepting that's okay. Katie says, I sometimes struggle to get my thoughts from brain to paper. You are not alone, Katie. Going great to see resilience out there and people strutting their stuff. Completely agree. He said, creativity on the pitch is my skill. Good players see pitches before others do. And again, a lot of the time, he mentions it in a bit more detail that he is not going to be your best player in terms of, is he going to get all the goals? No. Is he going to like tackle the ball? No. But what he is able to do is creatively see the pitch in a three-dimensional way. He's much better at strategy. He's much longer at the long game. And as a result, he's been in the top 3 for disability sports for his county for the past 2 years. And again, yes, county. We're not talking country. We're not talking the world. Just a local small area. But that's still a massive win. We don't all have to be like on like Times Square, winning BAFTAs. Just a small wins, is good enough. And I think you should be really proud of yourself for those little wins. Stephen has now plans to be the first person with dyspraxia to hold a UEFA B license. Apparently no one else has it yet with dyspraxia. And I think good on you, pioneer that way. Sally says, I struggle with the idea, and it's always when others articulate my thoughts that it suddenly becomes clear. Oh, yeah, I could see that. Gavin, muscle memory can play a huge part in further development, and small wins reinforce this. Absolutely. If you're told you can't do something continuously, you're going to think you can't do it. I know with Stephen and the person who did boxing, was it Philly? So moving on from Stephen, we'll keep this motivational day going. We're now on to the Harry Potter series. So which Harry Potter actor is neurodiverse? Is it Radcliffe? Is it Watson? Or is it Grint? Now, I'm guessing from what a lot of you have said, and if you've been to any of our other webinars, you'll know this. It is, in fact, Daniel Radcliffe. But Emma Watson is also neurodiverse. She has ADHD, and she even takes medication for it, which is something I didn't realise until quite recently. But obviously we're focusing on dyspraxia today, so let's focus on Daniel. Harry Potter himself. What I love about Daniel is he doesn't want to be typecast. He doesn't focus on dyspraxia. He mentions it, but then he moves on. Same with Harry Potter. I love the Harry Potter series, but I actually think the films he have done since then are actually way better. Well, maybe not way better, but are more diverse in his range. He's been a Nazi, he's been a dead body, he's been like a Victorian mansion owner. He's been all sorts of things. So yeah, really great reverse person. Sally says Emma Watson is also an introvert. Yeah, and you will notice about that. You can still be an actor and an introvert. So Daniel said, talking about dyspraxia, it has never held me back. And some of the smartest people I know are people who have learning disabilities. The fact that some things are more of a struggle will only make you more determined. And I think we're starting to see a pattern here, right? No matter whether you're a celebrity or just someone in your local community, it's the same. It's a struggle that has made people successful. Dyspraxia hasn't been the thing that has made these people successful. It's been that kind of determination, that perseverance, that coming over adversary, which has allowed the person to achieve. And I think, you may disagree, but I think most of the successful people do have an underdog story, and it builds up resilience and grit. So is neurodiversity a superpower? Not really, but does living with it give you the strength and the grit needed to do super things? Absolutely. Stefan said, a lot of actors are introverts themselves, but use hiding behind a character to speak out. Absolutely. Masking is a very big thing in the neurodiverse community. That's where you put on a facade and you kind of act out. Yeah, good on you. The downside, however, is you can burn out a lot easier because let's face it, it is exhausting to pretend to be something you're not every day of the week. Okay, now moving on to Florence Welch. You may know her from Florence and the Machines. I don't know who the Machines are. No one ever talks about them. But today we're going to be just talking about Florence. Gavin says, no need to be the elephant in the room. We are all on a variation on the theme of the experience of being human. I think so. It's always good to speak out about these things. So Florence, again, always, if you Google any list on the internet about having dyspraxia, she always comes up. But what does it actually mean for her? So Florence said she's very proud to be dyspraxic. The fact that I work in a creative industry probably helps. In fact, I think in some ways it has helped. We dyspraxics think in a different way. And if you know Florence from Machine, she is a bit more quirky, a bit more kind of like a free spirit. And just like her and as other people in this lists, they all have gotten to a stage where they're like, I don't care. The kind of social constructs and stigma and kind of the gossip that we face around us, they've been able to let it go. And again, I'm not sure if that's directly related to dyspraxia, you tell me, but I do think that has been a direct correlation to their success. If you actually do a bit of research, Florence, there's also articles where she has dyslexia. Sometimes she doesn't even mention dyspraxia. None of the celebrities actually speak that much about it. And so that's one of the reasons I don't actually want to focus on them too much. But I must say, they are useful for when you're trying to explain to someone who has no idea what dyspraxia is, that they've got someone they can at least visualize and kind of like connect success to. Stefan said, in business, we want people to think outside the box. Most dyspraxic never even found the box to think inside. Ooh, good quote. Who did that? There is a difference, Sanjan says, between children and adult diagnosis. If you can get early support on, you can plan out your life and goals. As an adult, it's much harder to fulfill your dreams. I think it very much possible, but I agree with you, it can be harder because you've kind of got to rewire that way of thinking. Sally says, I don't think it's impossible to achieve anything as an adult, but it does mean working 10 times harder than a neurotypical, someone who doesn't have dyspraxia, mainly because the world is still far behind when it comes to inclusivity. I completely agree. Anya says, I literally don't know who most of these people are, lol. Well, that's fine. You know what? If anything, I think that says more about not enough people are talking about dyspraxia. You must have known Daniel Radcliffe at very least. Okay, now for another local person, Jade Hall-Smith. You won't have heard of her, and she is actually the baby in this picture. She's grown up now, but there wasn't many pictures of her online. Yet she is a local dyspraxic artist, and she has, I think she has a really interesting story that I thought would be worth sharing. So, in a nutshell, she says her dyspraxia presents itself with fine motor skills. So these are just like knife and fork, like small things when she's trying to get what's in her head out. So maybe when you're writing and the thoughts in your head do not translate to the marks on the pen, or when you're doing a shoelace and you know the type of knot you want to tie, but it just isn't translating very well. She goes on to say it takes longer to learn something, yet Jade remembers it well once appropriately shown. And I think that is so key. And I think if employers knew more about dyspraxia, they would have more patience. It's not that we are incapable of learning, we can absolutely learn. It's more comes down to the way we are shown. If you teach us in a neurotypical way and our brains do not learn in that way, we're not going to have that retention. So maybe come at it from a different angle. Now, knowing what angle to come at it is the challenge, but it is definitely possible. Sally says, it takes me at least a few months to fully understand things. And that's fine, but I bet once you've learnt it, you learnt it. I know for me, I remember things from like years and years and years back, like really random facts, but I struggled in school so much because the rate it takes my brain to learn something was a lot slower than the pace that the education system moved in. Joan says, getting this stuff out of my brain into the world is the hardest. It is. When you know you're a creative person, but you're not able to unlock that creativity and let it flow, can be a challenge. And it's about finding the right way that works for you. Easier said than done, I can appreciate. And it's a shame you are not remembering it. You get worse at it. Yeah. They think you weren't listening. Oh, hell yeah. I heard people always say, oh, no, you're not listening to me. Well, I was listening. I just can't remember. She says she's good with visuals, thinking outside of the box, and empathizing. This is one skill that I always think is quite unique to dyspraxia. People with dyspraxia tend to have really high levels of empathy. And I think there is a link between empathy and taking a longer time to process before speaking. Says, my dyspraxia may get me lost from time to time, a little clumsy or forgetful too. So she's not disregarding the challenges that come with it. But what she is saying, yet she doesn't think that she would be as creative or have done so well academically without it either. And it might seem a bit contradicting, but it isn't. Because just because something is more harder, if you can use that to create motivation for yourself, absolutely a strength. Don't ever feel as though your dyspraxia holds you back. You are you for a reason. Own it. Very, very empowering, I hope. Jackie says the education system needs to be completely overhauled to provide different ways of learning to give individuals the best opportunity to enhance their potential. Completely agree with you there. Stephen, it's either Stefan or Stephen. Sorry, I'm really bad at pronunciation. I literally cannot watch TV shows where a character is in an embarrassing situation. The empathy is crippling. I agree with you. I've always been a sucker for those coming of age teenage stories. I'm like, damn man, can't believe you just did that. And it's only getting more cringier the older I get. I am ashamed to say, oh, maybe I'm not. During lockdown, I watched the entire series of Riverdale. I can't do it. Can't do it anymore. I'm out. Anya said, academic results can be good, but they don't see the nervous breakdown that happens behind the scenes or how much longer it takes. I think in certificates, there should be an honourable mention that, yes, you've got your grade, but also you had this to overcome. I don't know, but it is harder for sure. That's why some people homeschool their kids, because they can be themselves, which isn't permitted in mainstream education. True, but then you have the issue of not being able to have that social interaction. It swings and roundabouts. Joan agrees. Stephen, at 51, at 12, I was kicked out of art school as the teacher said I was unteachable. You hear so many stories of teachers being so rude, but yet they'll never admit to it. The great thing about getting lost all the time, Jones says, is build an incredible map in our brains about how to find our ways around. I completely agree with you there. My mum always calls me a homing pigeon. No matter where you dump me around the world, I always find my way home, despite not being able to read a map. One says it was disheartening, yet fulfilling, counselling at a high school at seeing the neurodiverse kids being treated so poorly. Yeah, that is hard. Next, we have David Bailey. And you may not have heard of him, but you would have seen his photographs. He's one of the most famous photographers in the UK. He's an absolute boss, and he was at his peak in the swinging 60s. He did Andy Warhol, the Beatles, Mick Jagger. He did all the greats. And though he doesn't directly speak about dyspraxia himself, his wife did actually mention it. She says, people with dyspraxia are often creative. This may include writing skills or poetry. The children see what Bailey has done through his endeavours, and they realise their difficulties don't really matter. So she does speak in relation to dyspraxia. She doesn't directly say he has it, and yet he's quoted a lot for having dyspraxia. But if you read between the lines, I think she is saying it, to be honest. But just know there isn't that much evidence for him. But I found it interesting because if he is, being one of the best photographers, there's also a quote he says where cameras do not take good photographs, people do. And he obviously has a unique way of looking at the world. He took this picture of the Beatles, and I put that there just because they're one of my favourite bands. Katie says, I have learnt to find my own way around places eventually. I am no good at giving others direction. I'm always like, yeah, mate, it's just up the road. And then like a few minutes later, I'm like, it was the other way. I do my best, but and then it's too late. You want to run after them and say sorry, but at that point, too late. Let's just hope I never see him ever again. So I want to ask you, at what age did you get diagnosed or realise you had dyspraxia? And if you don't have dyspraxia, completely fine if you're just here for educational reasons. But if you do, or if you think you may have. So Katie was 11. Sanjan, 48. Gavin, 7. We got 4, 7, 29. I think I was like 3 or 4. And this is, again, interesting to know because it does, as we mentioned earlier, yesterday. Oh, done. Super recent. It is interesting. My daughter, 13, but still query ASD on the spectrum. It is different whether you are diagnosed at an early age or an older age, because when you're younger, you just accept it. But when you're older, there is always this like, am I not? And even if you're not diagnosed and you're pretty certain you do, unless you get that kind of confirmation, you might not feel confident in speaking about it. And I asked, Stephen said it was called clumsy child syndrome back then. Yeah, people were mean. And as we know now, not a very accurate name. The reason I wanted to ask the name is it then brings me on to I wouldn't say celebrity, but maybe semi well known if you're in the space of this person called Dr. Emma Tremaine. I might have said it wrong, but you can read it. And she is known as the Dyspraxic Doctor. And Emma spent most of her early life until her later 20s not knowing she was dyspraxic, but having the symptoms very heavily. And she wrote about these experiences and she created a very well known blog called The Dyspraxic Doctor. I recommend checking it out if you've got some time. A really inspirational story of someone who maybe might be more similar age and a bit more relatable as a real human being. Thousands of people have read her stories of undiagnosed dyspraxia. It's kind of like Bridget Jones, but a less pitiful and more realistic and more inspirational version. Emma writes about her experience as a medical student at Oxford University. Another great example where it isn't about intelligence. Dyspraxia, intelligence, different things. Despite battling depression, and let's be honest, depression and neurodiversity, they go like peas in a pod. They're different, but they do heavily go together because it's difficult living in a neurotypical world. Yet she has used this empathy she has for understanding things like depression, anxiety, and her dyspraxia to support other people with these challenges. And she's also, I think it was only in like 16 or 18 months, she was able to raise the profile of dyspraxia worldwide. And she's one of the few social media influencers, you could say, in the dyspraxia space. So definitely a really good case study to look up if you've not heard of her. Joan says, I heard about dyspraxia for the first time about 2 months ago. And that's exactly as we mentioned, it's really common. It's as common as dyslexia. That's roughly about 6.3 million people in the UK might have dyspraxia. Yet no one knows about it. They then called it lack of coordination, then poor hand-eye coordination. It was 29 years before I heard the word dyspraxia. And nowadays, more professionals will call it DCD, development coordination disorder. They move away from the term dyspraxic because dyspraxia is actually more of an umbrella term, and it can even refer to things like acquired dyspraxia with like head injuries. So that's why doctors may not actually use that term, FYI. Oh, Stephen says there's anecdotal evidence that dyspraxias have higher IQs than neurotypicals. Mine's 166. Ooh, which I take proof of how useless IQ is. Hypermobility is common. Do you know what? I don't actually like IQs so much. I don't think they're a very accurate way of testing intelligence, particularly for neurodiverse individuals. They aren't a great measure. But I would say that makes you a genius from what I understand. I think genius is 150. So congratulations. Hypermorbidity, morbidity is common. Absolutely. Having one thing and having another is, or about movement. And movement, it completely affects it. So now we're getting on to politics, which everyone loves, right? The UK has three main political parties: Conservatives, the Labour, and the Liberal Democrats. But did you know there's only been one MP, Member of Parliament, that has ever talked about dyspraxia publicly? Do you know which party they belong to?
I was meaning joint hypermobility, which is like loose joints. So, yeah, I can write about it.
Okay, what, like movement?
I think basically it's to do with like, proprioception. And if your joints are lost in space, if you've got loose joints and your brain is wondering where your head is and your joints are, it affects your balance. And because your brain's always trying to find your head or find your joints. Mm. So when it can't find them, or things can't find them, it tightens up your neck, for example. And apparently joint hypermobility, I was just reading a paper, I think a lot of people with ADHD, like most of them have that. And they referred to DCDs, so the developmental coordination disorder. So that's why I was curious as to whether, connective tissue disorder, double jointed, all of that stuff.
Oh, thank you. Well, I don't know a great deal about that area, but I have also read similar things, and I know that it's not uncommon for people with dyspraxia to have lower muscle mass because of maybe it's directly related to the lack of either exercise or just because there isn't as much mobility that it can have effect on your mass. But that's not for everyone.
Because too much mobility, meaning like your joints are loose, so the muscles get, the brain tightens the muscles to kind of keep them in check. Like, but they're weak as well. Like I couldn't swim at all. Like I'm quite weak.
Oh,
Yeah, so I don't know, I was just curious.
yeah. Hypermobility is one of the diagnostic criteria of dyspraxia. Thanks. Double jointed, maybe. Also, you're more likely to be left-handed if you're dyspraxic. Fun fact. I'm not left-handed, but I am somewhat ambidextrous. You know, we can use both. I go between the two. But yeah, for the question anyway, it is Labour. So the first MP is a person called Emma Lewell and Lewell-Buck, and she is an MP. She's the MP for South Shields. And what's interesting about her is that she's the only MP to publicly talk about dyspraxia. There's definitely been more people with dyspraxia, but they don't talk about it. She's proud to represent people with dyspraxia and speak up for them, but she does put her constituency first, she says, but obviously she needs those votes. Some things are harder for her than the average MP, like she has to work a bit harder to remember facts and figures. I like that because yes, it might take her a little bit longer, but you know she's a hard worker and she's really putting in the hours. Where I do question some of the other MPs. She wanted to be an MP for a young age, yet the odds were stacked against her. So again, perfect underdog story, seeing the challenging, being told you can't do it, and doing it anyway. Only 650 people get to be in the House of Commons, and yet she's one of them, despite taking her longer to complete tasks that other people would complete in a breeze. A quote she says is, "The fact that our brains work differently can make us ordinary or creative thinkers." So the last one I want to bring you on to is Siena Castellon. Castellon. Oh god, you know, I have butchered everyone's names today, and they're not even that difficult. Siena is a neurodiverse advocate who is dyspraxic. She's also autistic and dyslexic, just like myself. Yet she is a powerhouse. Since like 13, she has been advocating for neurodiversity non-stop. She created a website for special education needs students to have like mentoring, and it's still up there, still up and running today. She also is the founder of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. It's still early days, but exceptional individuals, we always celebrate it and try to do something for it. 500,000 students from over 760 schools took part in it in 2020. Not bad, eh, for something that a young person created. She is also an author of the Spectrum Girls Survival Guide, How to Grow Up Awesome and Autistic. Though remember, she is also dyspraxic, that's why she's in the list. And she even did a successful crowdfunder to make sure a copy of her book was in every single girls' state secondary school. Gav says, yeah, great advocate. And she also is planning, oh, she might even be doing it now, I'm not sure, studying physics and maths at university. So it doesn't matter your age, you can still be a complete boss, even if the odds are stacked against you. So that's most of them now. Just a quick, there's so many more, but these were just a few of my favourites. I want to know, out of the ones we mentioned, who did you find the most interesting or the most inspirational? Jess from Dyspraxic Me, Perry, the personal trainer, Jade, the artist, the Dyspraxic doctor, Dr. Emma, or Serena. Oh, I need help with pronunciation so bad. But let's put that down to my dyslexia and dyspraxia, right? It's a good get out of jail free card, particularly for this. Okay, so I'm going to say Siena is the winner. Obviously, everyone's a winner, and it's not a competition, but I think she's a great role model. My daughter has read this book, but pointed out to me that she doesn't suffer with anxiety. Oh, well, I haven't actually read the book, so I couldn't say. I actually haven't met her as well, so I think it's long overdue. She is at university in America. Oh, thanks, Gavin. Oh, she's doing it now, yeah. Amazing young lady. Yes, I have made it through notes, which I start a new job and it takes me longer to learn. On the other hand, I am always picked to train new staff after a few months. I think you might be even better for it. So that's really interesting. And the last thing I want to end on is, do you have any success stories that I've missed? Any other people you know? Or maybe you've got your own little story, something which, despite the odds, you've been able to overcome. and maybe we can feature you or the person you're speaking about next time.
Yeah, just so that I can introduce myself, if you don't mind. I'm the coordinator for Dyspraxia Foundation for the Lambeth, and you might have seen my
Oh,
posts.
amazing.
I'm also, I guess my own story is I'm dyspraxic. I was non-verbal up until age of 7. I'm diagnosed, and then I ended up getting support through my school, support through school from the age of 7 to about 14, and then I became a mechanical engineer. And then I'm now just finishing a master's degree in education. So I did my PGCE, but later on in life, where there were computers and systems that could help me get stuff done. So, for those who are here, never put off studying, always continue to learn the best way you can, but just look for opportunities that work for you. And I think that that's an opportunity that, you just got to be resilient and persistent at it. I think what I find speaking to a lot of dyspraxics, they can be quite tenacious, and I think and resilience comes into that as well. I certainly have seen that. Siena Castellon was my case study for my master's degree in terms of STEM subjects, stuff like that. And we met a few times and had some really good chats. And yeah, she's really resilient and an amazing young lady. And of course, she's doing physics. She might end up at NASA. We hope so, anyway. So, yeah, I'll just say to those who are here, who just never give up and always look for your tribe. Just join your tribe and work with your tribe in neurodiversity. So champion it where you can. And, that's just a bit of my story. But my goals are really continue to support post-16 sixth form and really develop young people, and I have an interest in them successfully transitioning into the world of work, and we just see how that goes in the future. So please look at my website and support us where you can, and I'm on Twitter as well at Dyspraxia Lambert.
Amazing.
That's all from me. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Gavin, and it's really great to have you and your background as well. Hopefully we can find a way of working together in the future. Sally's also said, in previous jobs was never promoted beyond entry level, but in my last job was given responsibilities for the financial organization of the company and ended up being in the highest paid employee, even higher than the employees who have been there for a while. Nice. Thanks so much, Gavin. Perfect. Well, again, I hope you found today nice and inspirational. I always like to mention our workplace needs assessments. So if any of you are dyspraxic in the workplace and could do with a helping hand, reach out to EI. We might be able to support you. We support all our community and individuals completely free of charge, and it's only organizations that we charge. So definitely worth getting in touch. And just so you know, we have a whole heap of videos and webinars we've recorded every single week for like forever. So maybe you want to learn about dyspraxia in pop culture, or a brief history of neurodiversity, or the Equality Act. Rebecca says, no one I've seen wants to diagnose it. They just want dyslexia traits. Yeah, that's because it's very difficult to diagnose someone, expensive, and there's a whole heap of reasons. But if you do want a diagnosis, go for it. Your best bet is to look for a private diagnosis person, because the NHS, they're not that willing, to be honest. The website might be helpful. There is a relationship with a verbalized mentor. Oh, thanks for sharing it. Anyway, here's our details. Get in contact, like and subscribe, ring that bell for notifications if you're on YouTube. But I hope you enjoyed, and it's been lovely having you here as always. Almost there for the week, guys, but thank you so much, and I really appreciate all your interaction today.